This is episode 105 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Becky Nova. Becky is a real estate investor and the founder of Lady Landlords. She owns and manages properties in New York City and the Dominican Republic. She helps women achieve financial independence through real estate investing with courses, coaching, and a huge Facebook group, which we'll talk about. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. What I want to know first is, when was the first time that you really thought about real estate as something you would be involved in as an adult, or maybe it was as an adult already?
I was already, I still don't consider myself an adult really right now, to be honest. But honestly, I was in my mid-30s. It was only in 2018 that this even became a thing that we were going to think about. I was really in a position where I have lived in multiple countries. I was traveling the world. I never wanted a home for me to live in. I never wanted to settle down really in one place. So real estate was not on my radar till my mid-30s.
That's funny though, because now for people who want that kind of life freedom, a lot of them get it from real estate.
That's the irony of my story.
Yeah. But I think that, and I really think that it's helpful to listeners, because a lot of people think like, oh, well, I didn't start at 18, so I guess I can't do it. But you started in your 30s, and like now it's been a 5-year cycle of where you've got to now. What was the first thing that pointed you to real estate as something that you could use to create the life that you wanted eventually?
Sure. So I hate talking about my first property, because I have to admit that my husband was actually right. so it just always starts off wrong. But my husband's actually an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. He moved to the States when he was about 18 years old and really came with that American dream of wanting a home. So meeting me, who was a person that had lived in multiple countries and never wanted to settle down, we kind of found ourselves in a little bit of a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
As you do in relationships, you have to compromise. So I said, fine, if we want to buy a home, we have to find a way to really be able to make money from it. So I always say that I had the best idea ever that nobody else had ever thought of, which was to buy a multifamily, live in one side and rent out the other.
Yeah.
Never heard of bigger pockets, never heard of house hacking at this time. It wasn't my space.
Yeah.
So we bought our first property in New York. We bought a duplex, and literally at the closing table, when they were like, great, so here, by the way, you just gave us all this money, signed your life away to us for the next 30 years, but here's a check from your tenants. On day one, I said at the closing table, I was like, we are doing this again. I'm buying more real estate.
Yeah.
And everybody at this closing was like, that's not a thing. Like, you can't do that. And I was like, I can. Like, this is a huge opportunity that I just found. We've got to do this. And that really was the complete game changer for us.
So you had a 2 and a 4. Those were the first two. What was it like? Because you were saying like you didn't even really know how to like work the house. How was it figuring out how to become landlords? Because this is going to lead to your journey of becoming the Lady Landlords and creating this whole thing. But what was it like just figuring out how to landlord?
At the very start, it was so confusing because there really is no like guidebook, right? You have your lease, and that can be very black and white, right? That just from a standard perspective tells you like, this happens when this happens. But there's so many situations in landlording that kind of fall within that gray area. I'll never forget the tenants that we had upstairs in the duplex. The girl called me and she said, hey, I put too many clothes on my clothing rod in the closet and the rod collapsed. So I need a new one. And part of me was like, well, do I need to pay for this? Was it the structural integrity of the clothing rod?
Yeah.
Or was this because she overloaded it with clothes? Like, really, like, who's responsible? And like, I'm sitting there and I was like, there's no way I can overthink every single little thing within this business.
Yeah.
So we really had to put structures and kind of systems into place to really be able to make the decisions of what was going to be our responsibility versus theirs. Right.
Yeah.
So we were like, listen, it's a clothing rod. Let's make them happy. $25. Let's just buy a freaking clothing rod. Right. So we went and got that. But then at that point, that really gave us a good opportunity to get our footing into what are the things that we need to consider. Our lease definitely got beefed up. The way that we communicate with tenants definitely kind of changed. So that house hack with just having that one rental unit was perfect for us because it gave us enough of a taste to figure out how to make landlording work in the future. So then when we took on and now added another 4 units, it wasn't crazy overwhelmingness, which was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that way is better, because I feel like if you're over prepared as a landlord and you've never actually been a landlord, you're going to have a very, very extensive document that's going to scare people off. Like you have a 12-page lease. Someone's going to
Right.
say, I'm not really interested in that. That's way too much. Why are you talking to me about hanging rods in the closet? I'm just moving in. But as you said, you realize quickly that the four corners of the lease only tell you so much, and that a lot of it is like, okay, let's add this to our standards and procedures as we go. And I would kind of make that applies to short-term rentals as well. I don't know if you've dabbled in those, but short-term rentals, it's very clear. Like you can't really have everything there, because every time somebody stays there, they're like, they say something, well, we really need, more than 3 pots and pans. And you're like, well, that's a pretty good point. And then you
Right.
do that, and that's what you guys did, 2 to 4, and then at 4, you're gonna learn more about having more tenants in a building.
Right. And you can't account for every situation in life.
Yeah.
Who would have known that the closet rod would have happened? I had a tenant actually in the 4 family that had moved in. He, on his move in, he rented the 3rd floor apartment, and he was too cheap to get movers. And I don't know if you remember the movie Hook back with Robin Williams
Yes.
years ago, right? Well, there's a scene where Hook is walking up the stairs to go like kidnap the kids, and he drags his hook
Oh,
all through the stairwells. Apparently, my tenant decided to
did it.
reenact that scene.
Yeah.
And he did that with this furniture and absolutely destroyed the walls of like an 1890 house, like this old Victorian house. Totally ripped it up. We went and talked to him. We're like, hey, we're going to have you pay for that. And he was like, no, no, no. But I rented the apartment. I didn't rent the stairwell. And I was like,
That's
that's
a
an
good one.
interesting line of logic here.
Yeah.
Luckily, clearly my lease, it says the premise. But, that was kind of when I realized we're not going to be able to account for all types of people and all types of thought process. So we need to put, our best foot forward in a lease, but there's just going to be situations that are always going to fall outside of that.
And I think is this so when did you create Lady Landlords? How many units did you have, and where did the idea come from? And then we'll get into like how you're helping train people when tenants are really so interesting, I would say, to deal with. Like you said, you never know what's coming next, and you never know what their expectations are until you find out.
Right. So we had that duplex in 2018. We now had a quadplex in 2019. I promised my husband when we did our taxes in February of 2020, I promised my husband I would not buy a house in 2020. I promised him. Oh, actually, also to mention, in 2019, we also bought our first property in the Dominican Republic.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we also had that property. That was actually the first property we bought in the Dominican Republic, was actually a long-term rental.
Mm.
So now we kind of moved pretty quick there. So now, like I said, February 2020 comes up. We're doing our taxes. I state in front of my accountant as my witness that I would not buy a property in 2020. I didn't account for what was going to happen in March of 2020.
Right. Little did
So-
you know you'd be stuck at home bored. I mean, what are you supposed to do?
Correct. So now March 2020 comes, as many people did, they lost their jobs. My husband was one of those people.
Mm.
He comes home in the middle of March and says, hey, my job had to shut down due to the pandemic. And he was just like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're down an income stream.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, babe, we're fine. We've already replaced your income with our rental properties that we have. We'd already replaced it by that point in time.
Yeah.
So I said, we actually need to buy more property. And he looks at me and he's like, I lost my job. What do you mean we need to buy more property? And I'm like, because we can't count on corporate America to always take care of us. We need to take care of ourselves. He is just like, I can't deal with your out of box thinking here. This is way too creative, Becky, for me.
Yeah.
So he goes, kind of walks into the other room, kind of slams the door on me. And I'm like, there have to be other people out there that think like me. There has to be somebody else that's sitting there saying that we need to do things to start taking care of ourselves, especially with what was going on at that point in time. So what did I do? I figured, let's go talk to some strangers on the internet. I started a Facebook group called Lady Landlords. I figured it'd be like me and my mom hanging out. And I was wrong.
Yeah.
We had hundreds of women joining week after week. We now have over 1,000 women join us on a monthly basis. But it just all of a sudden made me realize that I wasn't alone in realizing that we need to start side hustles and start doing things that are going to take care of us and really taking control of what our future and our wealth look like.
Growing up the way that you both did you have any scarcity mentality? Because some people who don't grow up with a lot, and then they start to get things that are going, they almost feel like, one, I don't even know if I deserve this, and two, is this going to collapse? Is this all fake, even though I think we're doing it all right and attorneys are involved? Did any of that come into play for either of you?
So much. So much for the both of us. It's still something, honestly, even years later now, we still
Yeah.
struggle with. We'll kind of joke that we're like the richest poor people we know. My husband and I still live
I know what you mean.
we live in a 1-bedroom. I'll never forget this, like probably 2 years ago now. My husband broke a bowl. He always breaks my glasses and my plates and everything. But he broke a bowl. And later for like dinner, we had to figure out that we only had one bowl in the house. So we were like, well, I guess I'll eat first because I didn't break the bowl. And then he had to eat after me. And it was just never something that we like thought of being like, hey, I guess we should maybe go buy like another set of things. We're just people that we're very much minimalist. We've always kind of survived with what we've had and been very grateful for the opportunities. But it is something that we really struggle with. Hey, is this real? Is this fake? Is this something that we're really doing? Where does that kind of like FOMO or imposter syndrome also fit in? And that's something that like we constantly have to kind of like check ourselves and be able to say like, hey, this is something that we actually do deserve. And that's a lot of why it was so important for my husband to make sure that we were buying properties in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
We do own now a gorgeous beachfront luxury condo that's a short-term rental.
Yeah.
But we also own long-term sustainable housing that we rent to locals. Lady Landlords has also become a place where I feel like I can really uplift others that are in a similar position. So we do try to find that balance of what we can do to help educate others and have them be able to also kind of change what their financial direction looks like too. But the mindset has really been that's more difficult to change than buying a house, to be honest.